So I'm about to go into my acupuncture appointment, and I'm thinking about the incredible interview I did with Karen McMahon when we talked about divorce and breakups and such. And I was so moved by her, I guess we'll call it humility, to really own that before she started doing this work, she's really angry. She's really confused, very unkind to herself. And the way she spoke of it was without self-criticism or contempt or embarrassment. She just owned it softly, but boldly, without apology. And as she did that in her own journey, she healed. That whenever we judge ourselves, or certainly judge another, blame ourselves or blame another, that just, slows down the whole process, takes us out of feeling, takes us out of integrating, and keeps us spinning. And so as I was driving over here, I was listening to a message from one of my facilitators of PSI, and it's amazing. We've turned, he facilitates me, he gets facilitated, and we're friends. We have these different lanes that we're in. And it's reminding me also of my general counsel, who is my lawyer, and I'm her coach, and we're friends. There's this new way of clear communication, where we have these different lanes where one surrenders to the other to hold space, to provide wisdom, and the receiver has no defensiveness or justification or embarrassment that they're a hot mess in that moment or can't see their blind spot. And I feel like this is the direction we're all heading, from this me, and I got to keep it together, look good, and be all perfect, into this we, where nobody's better than anyone else. And each of us have our own genius and superpowers to support one another. And nobody needs to be in charge or take turns being in charge. I'm just so amazed how my own evolution and the people that I'm attracting in and who are evolving as well. Like even just my acupuncturist, when I first started with her, my God, now it's been about a year. She was going through her own stuff as she was becoming trained in her equine therapy, as well as being an acupuncturist. And then she gave me a session just a few days ago, and I was her first private session as an equine therapist. And I was just so inspired by her glory, and having watched her evolve over the last year while holding space for me as an acupuncturist. And then again, to surrender to her and the wisdom she has. She's in her power. She taught me so much that another blind spot had no idea. And so as you watch or listen to this amazing podcast with Karen, I want you to feel into her confidence that has such a soft humility to it, nothing to justify. And her presence is so beautiful. And the depth that we can go so fast as a result of that is exquisite. And to me, that's intimacy. Transparency, vulnerability, heart openness, presence. It's exquisite. So enjoy. Welcome to Intimate Conversations, Soul Medicine. Intimacy is an inside job. Hello, delicious people. Welcome to another episode of Intimate Conversations, Season 11, Soul Medicine, with a soul sister who I've had the pleasure of being on her podcast, the amazing Karen McMahon. We're going to be talking about breakups, divorce, infidelity nightmares. That is our topic for this podcast. We're going to go really deep into toxic relationships. And let me tell you a little bit about her before we get away to the races here. Karen McMahon, she's a certified relationship and divorce coach and founder of Journey Beyond Divorce. And if you go to journeybeyonddivorce/toxic relationship quiz, you're going to want to take that quiz. We'll tell you more about that at the end as well. But she began her divorce coaching in 2010 after recognizing that the pain of her divorce led her on a transformational journey into a powerful and unexpected new life. And she leads a national team of divorce coaches in supporting men and women around the world to become calm and clear and confident as they navigate divorce. And she is the host of the acclaimed Journey Beyond Divorce podcast, which I got to be on. And she's the co-author of Stepping Out of Chaos, Turning Pain into Possibility. This is exclusive accelerated divorce recovery program. So first and foremost, I just want to jump through Zoom, my experience was we had such a deep connection, and you are such a profound listener that I could express deeper, wider, grander, broader than I normally could. So just right out of the gate, hi, love you. So grateful to be back together. Thank you for having me on your podcast. How are you?
I am so good, and I'm so excited to be here. And I was so touched by our conversation and your journey and your pain and your bravery and your guidance of your higher self. I have gotten feedback from a number of listeners. I have sent many individuals to go listen, as I really feel like the way you navigated your single parenting journey is such a symbol of health and possibility for people who are in difficult relationships or difficult co-parenting, post-divorce relationships, and your beautiful way of keeping the focus on yourself and using the pain to heal, and just holding that possibility and belief for you and your son. I mean, just so gorgeous. And I'm so delighted to be back here with you.
Same. Thank you. Yeah. When I got off your podcast, I said to myself, I don't think I've ever articulated it quite so vulnerably and poignantly, that the feeling was, this wasn't against me. This was hard, but this was for me, for my evolution, for my son's evolution, and hopefully for my son's father's evolution. There's nothing against me in this. It was definitely pressure against the diamond, that's for sure. But I was like, bring it. Let's arise. Let's ascend. Yeah. So I'm glad you follow me in my newsletter and saw me in the purple dress at the prom, the adult prom.
Love the purple dress. And the other thing, given our conversation,
Yeah.
that really touched me was your Mother's Day post, and that you took care of yourself in the morning, that you had just finished a cleanse and you were out eating both French fries and onion rings, and that you were in some badass bar and just like in a corner enjoying yourself and doing your own little celebration. And I just thought, wow, there's a woman out there walking her walk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I did take care of myself in the morning. I didn't want to go out when all the other people were out with their kids, because that was just too much. I couldn't handle that. But I went out about 3:00 and got myself a beer. And as you said, after a 30-day Ayurvedic cleanse, I wanted French fries and onion rings yeah, I wasn't sad, but I wasn't happy, and I was real. So thank you. Yeah. I don't know your journey. You've been so wonderful to have me on your show. So I want to hear your journey all the way to journey beyond divorce. Yeah. Tell us what's happened. What happened to you?
Yeah, I left home early. I was like on my own by 19, and I didn't meet my my then husband until 34. And so I grew up with a decent amount of dysfunction, but I was brilliantly unconscious throughout my 20s and into my 30s. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I ended up meeting this guy who was just so handsome and charismatic and supposedly successful. And in my line of work, what I've learned and what I support my clients in understanding is when we fall in love, our intimate love is connected to our childhood experience of intimate love. And so often we marry some version of our mother, our father, if you lived with a grandparent, but some version of the guardians who raised us. And so depending on what you live with, that's usually what you experience in your marriage. And in healthy marriages, you can use that to heal and refine and grow together. And in unhealthy marriages, it doesn't quite work that way. So me and my then husband got married at 34. I had a kid at 36 and 38. I thought I was the luckiest person in the world for the first 2 years. By the time the second baby came, There had already been a lot of red flags, but for better or for worse, until death do. And I was loyal, and then it just started going sideways. And my turning point was my daughter's 2-year birthday. We had our one and only physical altercation. Things were so bad. They were financially off the rails. My ex, I'm a child of divorce. And so when we would fight, he would always throw the D word at me, as well as a lot of other mean and nasty words. And so by my daughter's second birthday, I literally, I was making chicken soup. So I was like elbow deep in chicken fat and stuff. And he was sitting there reading the paper. One of the kids needed something and I couldn't help them. And so he turned to the child and said, "Mommy's not listening to you and she doesn't care about you. And that's why she's not helping you." And it was just the last straw. And I took my hands, I jumped across the kitchen. I wrapped my hands around his neck and I started yelling at him, like, "Don't you ever." And he grabbed my neck and threw me up against the kitchen cabinet, and rightfully, "Don't you ever." And then he took the kids and he left. It was my daughter's 2-year birthday, and wherever they went out for a little while. And I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, who the hell are you? You are my rageful mom. My rageaholic mom was staring back at me. And I just knew I was so lost and I needed help, and I needed it right away because that was a scary experience. Yeah. And I went into therapy, and then I stopped and tried to make marriage work. And 3 marriage counselors later, I went back into therapy. And what my therapist said was, "You're a shell of the woman I met 3 years ago." And the woman she had met 3 years ago was pretty much a shell. So all this to say, people may hear me now on my podcast and doing what I do and think I've got something all together. I was the hottest mess. I was the most unconscious. I was utterly reactive. I was angry and hostile and confused and overwhelmed. And my kids were babies. And so that started after numerous attempts. I hired an attorney, and that was a 3.5-year brutal high conflict divorce with just CPS got involved, the police got involved. There were so many scenes up at the school. And so it was, I say about my divorce that it was both a living hell and the greatest gift I ever had.
I'm just going to let that sink in. I don't really go into much detail about how much the police were involved, social services were involved, 5150, he wanted to kill himself involved, there's a lot of darkness. Coming back from a vacation, I was gone for 10 days in Canada so he could see our family. I get back, there's a restraining order against me. I'm like, how could that? I haven't even been in the country, but they take your child and then you have to go to court to prove that. I mean, it's just like, it was chaos.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I don't mean it like I'm glad that happened to you, but I'm glad somebody else gets it and got through it and is better and is helping others. I'm so sorry. And on some level, I get what you're talking about. My first question is, the shell of a woman who became more of a shell of a woman. How did you first start to not do the work to become less angry, less hostile, less confused, all the things, more conscious? How did you first start to forgive yourself that you had? Because that was my biggest thing. I spread my vagina to this person. Like, what is wrong with me? It was so much self-hatred. Where was the first portal to evolution and growth and ascension for you?
I was so confused in the beginning, and I was so scared. I was very afraid of him. I was very afraid, even though I was a full-time working mom. So there's so many women that I really understand where it's like, I've been a stay-at-home mom for X number of years. I wasn't. I had a skill set I could go out and make. So that wasn't my problem. I was just, I think so much of my reaction was because of the household that I grew up in. And so there's a saying in 12-step programs, when it's hysterical, it's historical.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay. Uh-huh.
And so when any of us go from 0 to 100 in a hot second,
Right.
that predates whoever just pushed your button.
Correct.
That goes all the way back to your childhood. And so I had a lot of that going on. I had a lot of those triggers going on. And then, when you're in a relationship with somebody who blames and belittles and berates, and he was very smart. He wasn't emotionally intelligent, but he had has a very high IQ. So I would get tripped up a lot. And so when I first started therapy, it was truly an effort to find myself.
Mm. Mm.
And then to your question, what I remember was my self-talk. And it was almost like one day somebody turned the volume all the way up, and I was like, oh my God. And it was the way my mom talked to me, and it was the way my ex-husband talked to me. And I used to call myself a fucking idiot. Like, you're such a fucking idiot. And I think about it now, it's like all day, all week, all month, like whenever, and I was a perfectionist. So there was plenty of opportunity to fall into that category. I like to say that those of us who have gotten caught in high conflict relationships often have the evil triplets, right? It's people pleasing, codependence, and perfectionism all wrapped together. And we're just like, our own little hot mess without anyone even getting involved with us. And so for me, the first thing was like realizing how abusive I was to myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that really invited in, can you find some compassion for yourself? And I was like, no, I was 34. I would have been around the block. Like, what the hell was my problem? So I had to dig deeper and deeper. And I have some real childhood trauma, both verbal and sexual. And so it was like, as I grew, I realized, we don't lick it off the grass. We're set up, so we're predisposed. And so that's what really started my path to self-forgiveness is, you were put on this path for whatever reason, and you didn't just make bad decisions, like your history built on itself, and you were predisposed.
Yeah. Thank you. When I really got what happened, created programming, points of views, ways of being, and then I just recapitulated those. And that led to husband number one, husband number two, and all the things. When I really stopped blaming me and blaming others and just saw it for what it was. Oh, you were put into this soup. You learned this. You did this. Now we can do something else. That was a big forgiveness moment for me, where I could see it for the first time. Yeah. Is that a similar way?
Yeah, absolutely. And compassion. I think that I don't know that I ever had an ounce of self-compassion. And so I think for me, self-forgiveness, self-compassion were very vitally, it was important to connect those two. Because if you're unforgiving, the way I look at it is, if I'm unforgiving, then I've got my own bat beating the shit out of myself. And how does one rise like a phoenix when they're beating the shit out of themselves and you're on the ground? And so it's the self-love and the self-compassion that begins to levitate us to the emotional and spiritual energy that we want to have. And so they're vital. And I've worked with people who were raised in, dare I say, cultures of unforgiveness, generations of unforgiveness. Like, unforgiveness was the language they spoke. And so not only did they have all this other stuff, but then we had to uproot that unforgiveness and find self-forgiveness before they could actually go forward and truly heal.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go deeper there. Because I, in my journey, I've even noticed, because we're both smart cookies. I can stay in my head and say all the gratitude affirmations, and it doesn't do a damn thing to my heart, to my soul, to my body, to my subconscious, to my energetic field, to my vibration. I'm just saying it. I've even hooked up that, heart math, the inner balance. I've hooked it up, and, I've done my so blessed to do my speech at their annual conference and do my whole guided meditation. but I can do it. And I can say all the right things. I can say, I forgive myself. I have compassion for myself. I'm grateful for that. And the damn thing doesn't move. My literal vibrational coherence has done nothing.
Right.
Because we can't think our way there.
No.
We can only feel our way there. So this idea of self-forgiveness and compassion, this is a big deal. How did you get in your body? How did you literally integrate the energies of that subconscious? Yes, you caught yourself in the self-talk, but how did you really, it feels like a letting go.
Yeah, it's such a great question. For me and the work that I do, it really involves inviting in your inner child.
Mhm.
And, you know, most of the time I'm working with people who are parents, but even if you're not, you know, there's someone that you love, but kind of tapping into that inner child, and I'm really scared, or I'm really angry, and how old are you, or I have no voice, and how old do you feel in this moment? Don't give it any thought, just and then most of us will find that we have abandoned our inner child. We have given the silent treatment to our inner child. We have been annoyed and agitated by our inner child. And so for me, the work of self-forgiveness that got so deep was really merging my younger self with my mature self, and kind of talking through. It's like, okay, you know, you're a middle-aged woman. You're not the one who's scared. So
Right.
let's quiet down and listen. And I was describing this to someone the other day. I said, our inner child is like, I have dogs and cats. So if anyone's had a cat, like you open the door and the dog comes running, the tail's wagging. Hi, so happy to see you. Even a puppy will do that. You come into a room with a kitten, that's your inner child. They are hiding in a corner behind the couch, and they're not going to trust you for the next couple of hours.
Yeah.
And now our inner child, if we've ignored them and we've put them down, there needs to be a lot of tender attention so that that part of us is willing to trust our more mature self to merge. And so for me, that was a long and poignant and beautiful and complex journey.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we really ever get there. Just when I think I've got little you handled and she's safe and secure, you know, and I try something new or I expand in another area of my life, she's like, she'll come up again. But I find like I can bring her home more easily, more elegantly, and the trust, as you said, the trust is there.
Yes, is built.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
keeps me, I don't know about you, Karen, but it keeps me like an eternal student, or it keeps me humble. And it also allows me to be so understanding and empathetic of my clients, like that terrified, or that just, I want to do myself in, like it gets so bad. I hate myself so much for doing that, or for making that mistake, or what, like that level, like I've touched those places. I know those places. So keep going on this inner child work, because we're totally aligned in this. In order to do that, I assert we have to feel, not just, you know, talk, not just image what happened and where they were and when that occurred. But literally the body sensations are intense, motherfucking intense. Like when we go from level 4 trauma to 3 to 2, that's that short, intense, the cheetah's running after the gazelle. I'm in panic. I'm in rage. It's crazy. It doesn't last for very long, but it's really intense. And then it gets a little less, and then we get back to still point. We've got to be able to navigate feelings, emotions, body sensations, intensity.
Yeah. And so much, you know, we've learned how, you know, the body holds the score. And so all of our trauma is on a cellular basis. And so you're right. It's like if you're in your head, and I knew someone and they were a therapist, and I asked them about getting some support, and they were like, oh, I know all of that. It's like, this is not about knowing. This is not a no. This is an experiential, you know, journey, not a knowing journey. And so I think that it, for me, it taught me, it was the beginning of me sitting quietly and still in stillness, and and allowing whatever was there to come up. And Rumi has a quote about like, open your door and whoever's coming in, whether it's grief or anger or hostility, just welcome them. They're there for you, not against you. And so that was really the practice, and the practice that I talk to my clients about is this kind of very slow, quiet. And when it comes up, if you could, if not in the moment, but shortly after, to just tend to feel, allow. You will not cry for forever, and it will be cathartic. So I think I had a friend who would wipe the tears away, and finally she was like, if I start, it's like Niagara Falls, it's never going to end. And it was this scary thing because so much had been kept inside. And yet, again, we're not levitating to where we want to be with all of that weight, with all of that heavy weight. We need to be able to feel and release and process, and process, whether it's writing or talking, or singing or dancing. Process. You have to process all that out.
Yeah. In your group of clients, do you find it's sort of across the map of how people process best, what works for people, or have you really honed in on a couple ways that you really help them process the best?
One of my coaches, Carrie Doubts, also does grief coaching, and she's an enormous fan of journaling. I am such a fan of journaling. I have not been able to journal my whole life. It's just never, it's like I have 20 journals who all have like 5 pages filled. So for me, it's are you an internal or external processor? What do you like? There's a conversation about what do you know you need, and a lot of times we don't know because we've been so busy looking outside of us, we haven't looked in. And so, okay, so let's start to get to know you. And I find that for some people, it is moving your body. It's moving your body. And for some people, it's really processing through conversation. And other people really have the skill of that journaling, which I know is brilliant in terms of left brain, right brain, and hand to paper. And yeah, so I would say that it's as varied as the client base for me.
Nice. Yeah, I can't journal either. I'm like you. I've got the 5 pages in the different books. I do write things out when when I have Allana Pratt method processes that I developed, and processes that I've been taught, and those are writing processes. But just that free flowing thing, it makes it worse for me. It makes it worse, not better. It makes me spin in here. I have to be in my body. I've got to be in nature. I have my feet on the ground. I got to be rolling around. I got to be crying. I got to be doing something. I got to be trusting. This is what I need. I need to let go and trust my body. Trust my body is having an emotion to like a little you going, hey, I'm really scared. And if I can be with it and not change it or fix it, and trust and let go and surrender to the body will always take me home. If I interrupt the flow, it'll get stuck. It'll get worse.
Yeah.
If I can let it happen, which means I might look like an idiot. I might feel like the world is ending. I might feel like this panic attack is going to kill me. All the things are going to happen. But if I can have a facilitator is the best. If I can either be the banks of the river for myself, which is harder, a facilitator who doesn't judge is best. And I can just surrender to the process. I have my intention. It's going to come up, and just stay with me no matter what happens, all the way through to calmness in the body, not calmness disassociated, but calmness in the body. To me, that's the way I process the best.
Yeah. And I think that it's easy for us to should all over ourselves with you should this and you should that. And I think what you described is we're always best when we find our flow and allow it. And it doesn't matter if anybody else in your life thinks what you're doing is ridiculous or ineffective, or it's like that's where, if we could trust our just intuitive knowing and follow that path, it will be, I love the way you said it, it'll always take us home.
Always. Yeah.
I grew up on the ocean, so for me, one of the things I do, it's almost like going home to the womb. Like when life gets really rough, I just navigate right to bodies of water. There's something about that just is like home for me.
Yeah. I've had a hot tub here in Wyoming, so that's my body of water that I get
I
into.
like that.
Yes. So bring us back to the timeline. So you went through this contentious toxic relationship and then this contentious divorce. And then all of a sudden now today we're doing a podcast. Like, fill in the blanks there. How did you start the work that you're doing? How did your relationship with your kids evolve? Are you in a loving relationship now? Like, what's happened as a result of doing this deep, profound work?
So I moved out with my children in June of 2006, after 3.5 years of being locked in the attic. And it was such an amazing experience. Like, literally the day I moved in, my life completely changed. Like, not being in his energy and in that building, and just the freedom that came with that. And my mom paid, I left my divorce pretty much having destroyed my sales career, because I was such a basket case, and I was fully commissioned, and I had $60,000 in debt. That was my settlement, and 2 kids, and so when I moved in, I was so grateful, and I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to make this work. Mom gave me first, last, and security to get me started, and then she was like, you're on your own, good luck. And I was raised Roman Catholic, but in that first year, like 5 different people approached me and said, you would, I think you'd really like the Vineyard Church, which was a Christian evangelical church. So the first 4 I ignored, and then the 5th one, I looked up at the skies and I was like, all right, cast iron pan off the side of the head, I'll go. I think you're trying to tell me something. And it's been my home ever since. And I went from, I think that, being raised Roman Catholic, I never felt like I had a relationship with the divine, with God. It was like there were the priests and the bishop and the pope, and there was this whole like hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
That was just my experience. I'm not saying that that's everybody's. And when I went to the 12-step program, that was the beginning. And I went to Al-Anon because Dad was an alcoholic and my ex was a waker and baker, pot smoker. And so Al-Anon felt like a good fit for me. And that's where I began to realize how much baggage I brought to the table. But it also led me to this church. And so my faith is my North Star, and I do everything, with and but for the grace of God. And so, so that, had I not had that, because then a couple of years, so I was in this commission position, and then I went to coaching school and started my business. And the only thing I knew was failure is not an option.
Yeah.
That was it. That was my mantra. It's kind of a negative mantra, but it was like, failure is not an option. Yeah. And I just started, and there were months where I would sit on the couch and cry and think, there's just no way in the world I'm going to meet my bills. And the most miraculous things would happen. And there were times where I was like, I don't even want to look at the bank account and figure it out, because it seems so divine that I don't want to, I just want to say thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I just like, thank you. And for me, one of the hardest parts of my post-divorce journey was, I guess you can almost call it survivor's guilt, because my ex he's got some real anger management issues, and I know he's on the bipolar spectrum. And so you didn't know what you would get. You didn't know who you were going to get, Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, and you didn't know. And so there was just all of this uncertainty, and the kids would come home and they'd be insane. They would be fighting and screaming and disrespectful to me. And in the beginning, I think I would, give them consequences. And then I think it was like, I don't think anyone told me this. I think it was like this intuitive knowing that they're coming from this chaotic energy that I don't have to live with anymore.
Yes.
And they're coming to my little peaceful cottage, and they need a transition period. And so I started realizing, and I give them 8 hours. And so they'd come in and they would not be nice to each other or me. And in a bunch of hours, I would have my little people back.
Yeah.
And in that became a lot of games that I would play to try to understand what was going on at dad. So I came up with this game, highlights, lowlights.
Yeah.
And they were in grade school, like first, second, third grade. So it was, so at the end of every day and at the end of every weekend, especially if we were apart, we would talk about highlights and lowlights, and I would actually get a little bit of information about what life was like at dad's,
Yes.
the good and the not so good.
Yes.
And I decided very early on, I'm not going to say, as much as I have plenty to say bad about dad, I'll say it to my girlfriends. I'm not going to say it to the kids.
Yeah.
And so the kids, my ex was pretty hard on my kids. And so, like, he coached my son's football team, and you would think that's so wonderful, but he shamed him and embarrassed him. And I don't think he intentionally did any of this. I think he couldn't get out of his own way. So my kids would come home pretty upset often. And this is one of the things I talk to my clients about is, ask more than you tell, help them to figure out what they need, and don't ever mention the other person's name. It's not about that, because it's about, this is their journey. And if you're the emotionally healthy one, you're their guide. And so what happened, and how did it make you feel, and what did you do, and would you have done something differently, and what were you afraid of, and how can I support you? And I think that in doing so, I've created these two very aware, emotionally articulate, boundaried,
Nice.
young people that I'm like, where my son and daughter are in their mid-20s, I may have started getting to in my mid-40s.
50s. Yeah. Yeah. I love what you're saying. I want to say two things. I remember when I got the concept that I needed to fill up my bucket, or that he needed to fill up his bucket, and that this was this code language that if either of us needed to go to our room so that I wouldn't erupt or I had hit my limit, I just said, I just need to go fill up my bucket. I'll be back. And then he started to pick up on it. And he's like, I need to go to my room and fill up my bucket. So we are learning how to self-soothe and take care of ourselves. So that was one really great thing that I figured out. Like you, on the return, it was hell. I felt like I was the car wash. Like, come in, I'll clean it all out, and back you go into the whatever, the world. And so this one house, I remember when I would pick him up on the day from school that it was now going to be my turn, I wouldn't go home first. We would go on this walk, and there were these two huge white dogs. We called them the angel dogs. And then we go up around into this hilly area. And right before we go to the hilly area, I go, we got to go through the magical door. Got to go through the door. And the door is going to take off all of the energy we don't want. We're going to be cleansed. And we're going to hike up the hill all through the mustard yellow flowers. And there was this pond right on the top, and all these little turtles right at the top. And it was literally the cleansing ritual. And when I
love that.
Yeah, when I finally figured that out, then we'd go home, and I'm like, there's another magic door as we go in the door again. And every doorway was a way to, like, consciously put something down, cleanse it off, and choose with intention who you choose to be, how you choose to be, all the rest of it. When I started to get the hang of that, things went a lot better, because I would do exactly like you. I'm so excited to see them, and it's hell,
Yes.
right? And then I would go into blaming him, being a victim. It just wouldn't go well for anybody.
Yes.
I love what you're saying here. I love what you're saying here. And congratulations that you've raised such self-aware, emotionally intelligent children, and that we don't need two happy co-parents to create children who can navigate the world. And I think there's even a benefit there's always a pro and a con to every single situation, but so you have these two perfect parents and they always get along and you've never had to navigate conflict. And then you go off to college and people take advantage of you and lie to you. And like, there's a gift if both parents in co-parenting have to parallel parent, not co-parent, because you're just so on two different pages.
Right. And the kids they do get the benefit of that. And one of the things I used to say to my kids, I still do, just had to recently, asked my opinion. And I said, well, like my thing is don't ever let somebody else's bad behavior determine yours.
Thank you. That's nice. Yep.
And that was something I'm going to, because, and it's like,
yeah,
well, I suppose you could, I suppose that's a choice. But to your point, is that who you want to be? And
totally.
if you don't want to be that with everybody else, why would you want to be that with anybody else? Yeah. So, and my daughter, for me, I'm so proud of my daughter because I lost my voice. I lost myself. I lost my voice for so long. And she was a little girl, like 7 years old, and she'd call me and she'd be like, this one thing I remember, I don't want daddy to lay in bed and read books with me tonight. And daddy was probably having a tough day. And okay, and walked her through this. And she said, well, I said, so then if that's how you feel, why don't you say that to daddy? And she said, well, I can't, he's going to yell at me. And just walking her through, okay, what happens when daddy yells? Has daddy ever yelled at you before? And she's like, of course he's yelled at me, Mom. And what are you actually scared of? And what can you do? And then when you're done, close your door and call me back. And at 24 years old, there is nothing my daughter won't say to anybody. Like, she has rock solid boundaries. She's like, I got something to say, I'm saying it. And she may have other problems, but she will never, ever lose her voice. And I'm really proud of that, because for me, that was such a huge problem for me.
Yeah. Wow. Well done, Mama. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
How has your romantic life shifted since the divorce? A lot of, when we've gone through something really hellish, we're just like, I'll just focus on work, I'll just focus on my spirituality and be a nun. Like, don't want to open my vagina again or whatever. Because it's rich. What happened? What happened for you, Karen? Or what is
so I am single right now. And so I divorced I moved out in 2006. So 2 years later, I met a fella who he was in New York City, moved out west, and we ended up having this 7-year long distance relationship, which there's a lot of layers to. On one level, I was raising my kids largely alone and starting my coaching business. I don't know that had I met a guy who lived around the corner, I would have a hot second for him anyway. So this was like, I'd go a couple of times a year. I'd get flown out, to the Midwest and the Southwest, and I'd have like this 1 week of being a single woman with no kids and like a ton of fun. And then I'd come back and I would be like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't, like, you're stepping onto a like high speed escalator or something. Yeah. And then like half a day in, I was like, this is my life. I can do this. And so that went on for a while. And in the beginning, it was perfect. And then I wanted more. And I ran up against the fact that he was the healthiest man I had dated in my life. And yet he had some of the same issues. And so we're still friends to this day. We transitioned, probably rather a bumpy transition, but we transitioned into friends. And I dated a few guys here and there. And it's an interesting thing for me. I've actually engaged in some helping modalities to say, I was sexually assaulted as a teenager, and I'm like, I did the therapy. I don't think it's a thought thing, but I think my body's holding a score. So I've done some Reiki. Actually right now talking to an EFT person. And so I believe very firmly that there is a man who will be my husband, and that after all of the growth that I've been through, that God has somebody very special for me. And I kind of know it with every ounce of my being. And I'm 62 now. And people are so funny. They'll come to me in their 40s and they'll be like, oh my God, I'm so old. And I'm like, do you have like a fatal illness or something? Like, don't you have like 30, 40 years left? Like, what's the story here? So I feel like my grandmother died at 100 years old. I'm 62. If I meet someone in the next 8 years, I'll still have like a good 30-year relationship.
Oh, I'm in. Same. Wow. I don't remember if I shared with you on your podcast that I began psychedelic somatic integration work. Did we talk about that at all?
I think I've listened to something. I don't think we spoke about it, actually. I'm very curious. Yeah.
On the videos on my newsletter or what have you, because that sexual abuse, I had inklings of it, and but I never really understood what went down that created the patterns of where's the abuser to survive, the level 4 hypervigilance. I didn't understand that mechanism until I started this psychedelic somatic integration work. And with the use of ketamine or MDMA or cannabis, the different modalities, the way the brain and the body work, you just surrender to the body. This particular modality, you wear a blindfold, and it's a good 6-7 hour session, the first session, and you just let the body do its thing, and you're just like tension, shoulder, and then they'd say, let's allow that, and then the arm would start to move, and then they're like, let's allow that, and then the arm would do this.
Oh wow.
And it would push away the perpetrator, and then the image would come back, and then the smell would come back, and then what they said to me would come back. Like I was disassociated, and I would come back into my body. And the first time coming back into my body from disassociation feels like hopelessness, feels really, really awful. And then it goes into that intensity that I was speaking of, that short, like, no. But what was so beautiful, difficult, but beautiful, is I all of these suppressed memories and experiences, repeated sexual abuse, that I just disassociated. I recapitulated. My body, not me, the brain, me, the body, went through it again, went through the hands by your side, hearing the words, don't say anything, don't move. You made me do this. This is your fault. You like this. All the fucked up shit, right? All of it came back, and my body was responding according to how I was when I was little. And then as you allow the body to keep going home, the body wants to fight off, but didn't. But this, you get to give it a chance to. And I'm not in charge. The body's in charge. And the body's finally doing this. And I would sit up, still blindfolded, and go, no, go away. Like I could say what I was never allowed to say, do what I was never allowed to do. And my body took its power back. And then I got all the way back to home, worth, integrity, and forgiveness. Oh, that's why when something negative happens, you freeze. You become their friend because there's no way out. You've got to befriend your predator. Like all these behaviors that I could not figure out why I would keep doing, they were in the body, not in the mind.
That is actually so interesting and helpful, and I would be curious to learn more about that. I worked with a very schooled Reiki practitioner. I did a couple of sessions, and I remember one of her sessions, she was holding her hands like over my groin, over my sacral chakra, and for a long time, and it was the most bizarre experience. It was as if somebody flushed a toilet, and swooshing up my center, I started bawling my eyes out. No thoughts, no feelings.
Yeah.
And it felt so stale. It felt like this mucky, stale energy that was just like flushing out of me.
Wow.
And I was exhausted. And then she was like, how are you? And I was like, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. There was this huge release. So I know that it's all energetic. I love what you're saying, though. I'm so curious to learn more.
Good. Well, I'll share more about it. I'm getting certified in October because I've gone through 6 series of these PSI works with practitioners. I've interviewed them actually back in March. If you go back to the podcast, you can listen to the head of the Psychedelic Somatic Institute and my head facilitator I interviewed. It's been mind-blowing, humbling. It's taken so much courage, but I'm back in my body, Karen. And there's someone out there who's specifically designed to have such compassion and presence and solidity for you and honor of how far you've come and all that you do in the world and all the things. I believe the same is true for me. And so for anybody watching or listening who has gone through sexual abuse, who has gone through these, toxic relationships, I hope that listening to Karen and I do the work and be open and deepen our faith that we can welcome in, because we're all living until we're 100, some really nourishing relationships. So congratulations on all the deep work you're doing.
Yeah, right back at you, girlfriend.
Yeah. Okay, so logistics, and then let's complete. We could talk for hours, and we probably will once a year be in each other's podcast because we love each other so much. JourneyBeyondDivorce.com. This will all be in the show notes. JourneyBeyondDivorce.com/toxic relationship quiz. Tell us about this quiz and why it's so meaningful for people to take it.
When you've been in an unhealthy relationship for so long, when you've come from a childhood household that was unhealthy, it's very normalized. And so I actually, when I was thinking about putting this quiz together, I called a couple of my clients who've been with me for a while. And I said, when you first met me, if I had asked you if your relationship was toxic or high conflict, what would you have said? And they all said no.
Right. Yeah.
I thought I would have said the same thing. And of course, today everyone's, dealing with a narcissist. But back then I had no idea that my ex-husband was anything other than a jerk. I just knew that his behavior was very displeasing. And so we decided to put this, it's 10 questions, 10 toxic tells. And it's not all about the disordered person, because it's also questions about you, because we bring our own bag of tricks to the table that is also needs working on. And so we take you through these 10 questions, and there's 3 different levels. You're either in a highly toxic relationship, you're in a pretty unhealthy, verging on toxic, or you've got a relationship that needs some attention, but you're not in triage. And the idea is that people will take this quiz, and that there will be a clarity, because the other thing that we do is we listen to the other person, right? I have an article, Who's Renting Space in Your Head? Well, I wasn't living up there. I had fully rented it out to him, and his thoughts came first, his feelings came first. And part of the reason I was lost was I evicted myself. And so now you have to evict whoever that is from your head and reclaim that space. And you can't do that until you have some clarity. And so the desire is that the toxic quiz would give a lot of people this clarity, like, oh my God, yes, and yes, and yes, and maybe not, and you'll see where you're at. And then, in my humble opinion, the thing that's most important, once you're clear that you're in a toxic relationship, whether you're just marriage, whether you're deciding to stay or go, is secondary. What you need to do is you need to develop the number one most vital skill, and that is boundaries. Because once you know he doesn't make you feel and she doesn't make you do, you own your thoughts and feelings and actions, and they own theirs. And then how do you protect yourself from words or behaviors? And all of that doesn't have to involve you yelling at the other person and telling them how they should change. It's actually a gorgeous way of having full agency over yourself and protecting yourself. And so that's the path we're looking to help people get on.
I love this. What was one of the first boundaries that you put down once you moved out that really supported you? Was it an action? Was it the way you spoke? Was it a combination of both? I'm curious, what really supported you the most to get your sanity back once you moved out?
I felt so liberated. And I think I learned, so my ex, one day I woke up to 138 text messages. So I would have this kind of serial texting, serial emailing of 3, 4, 5 pages. And so for me, my first boundary happened when I was living with him, which was my most powerful. These boundaries afterwards were more about, I actually don't have to read all these texts. I don't have to read an email the minute it gets nasty. If I continue to read, I'm choosing to be abused, or I could shut it and put it away and take care of me. So again, am I abandoning little Karen one more time, or am I going to stand up as a force of love for her? My first boundary ever, I was standing on, we had an English tutor, and I was standing on the staircase in the central hallway and being belittled and berated. And I remember looking over at the table at the front door and seeing my car keys. And I swear it was a God thing. For the first time, I thought, I could actually just take those keys and leave. The kids are okay. He's not going to hurt the kids. And I was scared. And I just walked past him, grabbed the keys, and left. And it was like, people would be like, seriously? For me, it was the biggest thing to realize I don't have to get him to change. I could walk around him. And boundaries are, how do you walk around somebody and still take care of yourself in one way or another?
Yeah, this is great. That I keep studying and learning and the rest of it, when the trigger occurs, it's fight or flight. We're pretty familiar with that, but freeze, flop, friend, there's all these things we do, not what we're aware of, but our body, we just stay there and get abused. We just stay there and blame. We just stay there and be blamed. But when we can have awareness of this and integrate these wounds, then you actually see the keys that have been sitting there the whole time. You actually have the capacity to disengage from this thing and move in another way. So like the inside can create this outside shift.
And you can't do any of that without a willingness to stop looking at and complaining about that person and start looking at loving and considering what you need to work on. I think that the biggest thing, the biggest tendency that happens over and over again through a decade of doing this work is helping both men and women go from this outward focus, that it's the person or the circumstance, to, if you could trust that the only relationship you'll always have in your life forever and ever and ever is you, and start getting to know you, and start, and not with a bad, with gentle, kind compassion, start looking at, what did you bring to the table? What are those behaviors that don't serve you? If you don't do that, you can't have the experiences you and I have spoken about.
Yeah.
You'll be blind and deaf to them.
Totally. Yeah. It's so good. I like to say, become the one to find the one, or become the one to awaken the one. And in this becoming the one, we take our focus outside in, instead it's inside out. And I think that's why I asked you right at the beginning of our conversation about self-forgiveness, because when we come in, I also found such either abandonment or criticism. Those are the two MOs. And my little you was just not a happy girl. And I had to literally, in my mind's eye and in my processes, sit down with her and say, I'm sorry. I didn't have the capacity to sit with you before. I abandoned you. I didn't understand I was hurting you by being so critical. Please forgive me. What do I need to do to make up for the damage done and rebuild this internal relationship, which also was my internal relationship to the divine, which allowed me not to necessarily prefer or like what was going on, but begin to have the capacity to create and stick to a boundary, or even understand that what was possible wasn't even in my view. Yeah.
You know, Byron Katie says, nothing happens to us, everything happens for us at exactly the right time. We may not like it, but it's just easier if we do. And I just, to me, I'm like, you nailed it. That's exactly it. And that whole concept of, I may not like where I am, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it's a hard one. And it's a hard one for people who haven't quite, I think Michael Brown in the presence process would call it sleepwalking. And don't be waking up somebody who's sleepwalking. It's not your job and it's not their time. And yet when we begin to awaken, that's where, and it's always in the midst of the tribulation, that's where all the treasures lie.
So good. Well, I just adore connecting with you. You're amazing. I want everyone to go to journeybeyonddivorce.com/toxic relationship quiz and take that quiz, and take a moment after this conversation to go for a walk or do what neither of us like to do, journal or meditate, or but allow it to sink in. Something will have sparked an emotion, an idea, an action. Allow this conversation to literally move the trajectory of your life by taking her quiz for sure. And knowing that no matter what you're going through, there is from pain to possibility, as Karen says. There is from shame to forgiveness and unapologetic communication, like her beautiful daughter who can speak up. There are wonderful ways we can still be with our kids, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of their mother or father. We still have agency to be our best self for ourselves and for our children and for our future and our future beloveds, to have the kind of healthy relationship that is our birthright. So my love, in conclusion, if you would finish the sentence, I'm so grateful that I got born into this married and divorced hand, because how would you end that sentence? Because I think that really helps people let go of the victim. Like if we said thank you, divine, I chose this for growth, evolution, discovery, then we're sovereign and free. So yeah.
Because it led me on the path to God's flow for my life and my calling, and I am forever humbled and grateful for the mom I get to be and the work I get to do and the friends I get to have every day. It's just, I feel like what was a living hell ended up just being the greatest gift in the world.
Thank you. Thank you. You're so brave and so softly strong. Yeah. I acknowledge you. So we love you. Thank you for being with us on Intimate Conversations today. See if you can go find the podcast where I was on Karen's and listen to more of her podcasts and work with her if this is what you're going through, or reach out to me. Just know that you need not be alone, that we're in your corner and that we hear you and get you and would never judge you. And it's an honor to walk through the hell into the heaven, the darkness into the light. I believe that's what we're all here to be and do together. So
absolutely.
Love you, sister. Stay on when
Thank
I officially.
You.
Yeah. And until next time on Intimate Conversations, Soul Medicine, thank you for the honor of letting me love the shit out of you. Thank you. See you next week on Intimate Conversations. Get out there and make love to life. It's day 3 of 4 driving. I am in Kentucky. I was in Missouri, and the day before that, we were in Nebraska, and tomorrow we're going to be in North Carolina. And the year and a half of healing in Wyoming is over, and I'm moving on to my next adventure. And as we pulled into this hotel, Muffin and I am so proud of the resilience, fortitude, good attitude in the face of anything. People can be shitheads and not get me down. I'm integrating all of the traumas so that in the face of anything, not only am I strong and resilient, I can stay calm and centered, and I can literally feel and hear the universe's nudge in the direction that I choose. And I'm over it. Oh my God, I'm over it. I'm over it. I've been saying for a very long time that I'm ready to unpack my pods. My son has been an adult now for a year and a half. Like I don't need to hover. It is time for me. So I'm very curious if North Carolina is going to be where I end up putting down roots and getting those pods unpacked. Not very geographically desirable. I left them in San Diego. So North Carolina is kind of across the continent, but who knows? Maybe I'll do what the astrocartographer said and go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he says is probably one of the best places on the planet for me. Nonetheless, I'm feeling all these feelings, and I'm reminded of this incredible podcast with Karen McMahon, and we're sharing how divorce, breakups, if we lean in and do the work, can just bring out the best in us. And she was so beautiful with her kindness to herself when she was asleep, and then she started to wake up. And I'm reminded to be kind to myself with all the, I guess we'd call them mistakes, but certainly like rough experiences that I went through when the wounds were making the decisions as opposed to my heart and my truth making the decisions. And can we all be more tender, merciful, compassionate with ourselves when we discover, oh my God, the wound made that decision, not necessarily my heart or my truth. Right, Muffin? Oh, I did love you, I love you, I love you. Mwah. This is a great conversation if you tend to be one who's critical and beat up on yourself, to let that shit go and just pour kindness, tenderness into your heart, that we're all friggin' doing our best. And what if these breakups and divorces, etc., were there just to help us emerge and evolve into our best self, and that our best relationship with ourself can be right now, and our best relationship with our ideal partner can be right around the corner, because we have become that high-level partnership with ourselves. So we now can actually attract it, receive it, and thrive with it, not sabotage it. So please listen to Karen's podcast as well. Please follow her and her different programs. She has another summit coming up that she's asked me to be a part of again. So continue to listen to these conversations. She goes so deep, so fast. I'm so grateful for the depth of her listening and sharing and her empowerment to all of us. So please follow her, check her out, all of the wonderful gifts that she has, and any way that I can be there for you as well. It is my honor to walk through any fire, to cry, to laugh, to have a shot of tequila, whatever we need to do to get through this with a bit of spring in our step, and to open our heart, splay it wide open in the face of anything, so that we can be bigger, wider, deeper, grander than any circumstance or anyone's opinion of us. So we can be free, so we can be sovereign, so we can have a shitload of fun. So as I complete this little baby video at the end of the podcast, I'm going to do a little yoga. I'm going to have a nice hot bath, and I'm going to finish my jalapeno kettle chips that I was eating on my drive today. Have a little shot of whiskey, I think, and go to bed early and get up. And tomorrow is North Carolina. So thanks for being with us. All my love. See you next week on Intimate Conversations.